Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. While there are likely many wizards that come to mind when you think of Harry Potter and evil, Gellert, Grindelwald and Lord Voldemort to name a few, the title of most evil witch may not be quite so obvious. So in this video, we're going to be discussing why I believe that the most evil witch in the Harry Potter universe is one Gormlaith Gaunt. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Who in Merlin's beard is Gormlaith Gaunt? Wouldn't Bellatrix Lestrange be the obvious choice for most evil witch? Could she possibly be more evil than Bellatrix, the literal mistress of Evil Reincarnate? Well, of course, Bellatrix was a truly evil witch. She performed some incredibly cruel and heinous acts of magic, and non-magic for that matter, in the name of being one of Lord Voldemort's Death Eaters. In fact, the rumour is that Bellatrix was so devout to Voldemort and the dark arts that she actually fell in love and was intimate with the Dark Lord himself, producing a daughter named Delphi, taking the vows of a Death Eater quite above and beyond, if you ask me. But anyway, in addition to her absolute loyalty to Voldemort, Bellatrix was also involved in some of the most disturbing acts of dark magic described throughout Harry Potter. For example, she took part in the torture of Aurors, Frank and Alice Longbottom, an act which drove them both mad and permanently landed them in St. Mungo's hospital for magical maladies and injuries for the remainder of their lives. She also committed many a murder, including that of beloved house elf Dobby, her own cousin Sirius Black, and her niece Nymphadora Tonks. And she did all this in the name of pureblood supremacy and the Dark Lord's vision of the wizarding world. So yes, of course, it's true, Bellatrix Lestrange was a monstrously evil witch. But hundreds of years before there was Bellatrix Lestrange, there was an Irish witch by the name of Gormlaith Gaunt, whose acts of unspeakable evil rivaled Miss Lestrange's to the point in which I must admit that, in my opinion, she was indeed the more evil of the two. So first things first, who was Gormlaith Gaunt? Well, as I'm sure you've deduced by her surname, Gormlaith was part of the House of Gaunt, a prominent, fanatically pure-blooded lineage in Europe. The Gaunts are among those listed in the Sacred 28, a directory of pure-blood wizarding families, which was created in the first half of the 1900s. They were enormously proud of their ancestry, as they were the descendants of Salazar Slytherin, one of the four founders of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and a believer of pure-blood supremacy, and Cadmus Peverell, the most arrogant of the three brothers, who originally possessed the Deathly Hallows and served as inspiration for the tales of the three brothers. Tom Riddle, who, of course, became Lord Voldemort, was also a member of the House of Gaunt, as was his mother, Merlin Gaunt, daughter of Marvolo. With relatives like these, it's not too hard to imagine that Gormlaith would be one of the nastiest witches to have ever lived. Of course, Gormlaith was around long before Voldemort, and well after Salazar Slytherin and Cadmus Peverell, as she was born in the latter part of the 16th century. Much of what is known about Gormlaith's life actually revolves around her famous niece, Isolde Sayre, one of the founders of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the North American School of Magic, located among Massachusetts' Mount Greylock. In fact, it is her actions towards Isolde and Isolde's immediate family that, in my opinion, have garnered her the title of Most Evil Witch in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Let's take a look, shall we? As you may recall, the Gaunts were so intent on the preservation of their pure bloodline that they would often marry their own cousins. So it's definitely not an understatement to say that the House of Gaunt was fervent in their belief of blood purity. Gormlaith was no exception. Like many of her ancestors, she possessed the ability to speak in Parseltongue, a rare talent which allowed her to communicate with snakes. This was just one of the gifts passed down to Gormlaith from Salazar Slytherin, and she was also in possession of this powerful wizard's original wand. It is known that Gormlaith's sister did not share in the family's extreme anti-Muggle sentiments, and the two were rather estranged. However, although they were not familiar, Gormlaith knew that her sister had produced a daughter, Isolde. Gormlaith also became aware that her sister and brother-in-law were secretly helping unsuspecting Muggles with minor maladies and farm work, and so it is said that Gormlaith was so horrified by her sister's friendly interactions with local Muggles that she became concerned for her niece's future. How could she allow a pure-blood ancestor of Salazar Slytherin to grow up a blood traitor, intermingling and aiding non-magical folk? And so, Gormlaith, in an effort to redirect Isolde's life, killed her own sister and her sister's husband by burning down their home with the two of them inside, but not before rescuing Isolde from the fire. It would seem that in Gormlaith's twisted mind, the murder of her closest blood relative was justified, and that she was saving Isolde from a life that may have led the girl to accept non-purebloods, or worse, muggles. As you can imagine, childhood with an aunt like Gormlaith was not a happy one for young Isolde. For Isolde's entire youth, Gormlaith kept her isolated in a valley known as Cwm Cali, forcing the young girl to watch as she cursed any living thing that came their way, causing misery and pain to both her victims as well as to poor Isolde. Gormlaith also prevented her niece from attending Hogwarts, fearing that she would only be exposed to mudbloods and half-bloods in an all-too-tolerant environment. Instead, Gormlaith took it upon herself to teach Isolde magic, although she never permitted the girl to have her own wand, and kept her in line through the use of dark magic. Gormlaith kept the girl under this kind of restraint for years. It was over a decade before Isolde was finally able to make her escape. After she had fled, Gormlaith searched for Isolde for many years in vain, determined to find her niece so that she could go back to enforcing her fervent anti-muggle ideologies on the young woman. Fortunately for Isolde, she was able to travel undetected to North America, where she eventually fell in love with a muggle and founded Ilvermorny, a school of witchcraft and wizardry which today has a reputation as one of the most progressive and tolerant of its kind. When news of this American wizarding school reached Gormlaith in Ireland, she deduced that her estranged niece must be involved, as Ilvermorny was the namesake of Isolde's first home, the one which Gormlaith had destroyed when she had murdered the girl's parents. As you can imagine, Gormlaith was furious. Gormlaith set out to America at once to seek her revenge, for the very thing she had hoped to prevent seemed to have come true. Isolde was not only tolerant of muggles, she was in love with one, a James Steward. The two had even gotten married and had two twin girls, Martha and Rhiannoch. Upon her arrival at Ilvermorny, Gormlaith attempted to use her Parseltongue and dark magic abilities to murder Isolde and her husband James. Thankfully, her plans were foiled by two teenage wizards, Chadwick and Webster, whom Isolde and James had adopted, the Power of Love, and a Puckwudgie named William, whom Isolde had befriended many years previous. Ultimately, it was the Puckwudgie, a magical being native to America and distantly related to the goblins of Europe, who killed Gormlaith with one of his poisonous arrows. If you ask me, it was a fitting end for a witch most evil, a woman who had spent her entire life in the pursuit of pureblood supremacy at any cost, including murdering members of her own family and holding her niece hostage for years with the use of dark magic, was killed with a fatal arrow to the heart. A poisonous arrow for a poisonous heart. Seems like poetic justice, does it not? And that brings us to the end of this video. What do you think? Does all this rightfully give Gormlaith Gaunt the title of most evil witch in the Harry Potter universe, or is there another witch that I've overlooked? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends.